Welcome to Viviane Art. Hopefully we have some people joining us for our IG Live celebration. Kyle Beal, launching a brand new exhibition of works entitled The Green Room. Is Kyle with us, Mika?
Yep, he's just joined.
Hi, Kyle.
Hi, Viviane.
Thanks for joining us. This is an exciting day, and it's been a really exciting week around here, I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
In a few minutes, I'm going to get Mika to do a wander around the gallery so that people watching the IG Live can see all of the work. And then I think we're going to just quickly pop out front and show everyone Night Watch. Does that sound okay?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Can you hear me okay, Kyle?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can. Yeah.
Good. Awesome.
I should have said a more emphatic, yeah, that sounds wonderful.
That sounds amazing. Okay, so I'm going to get Mika to walk around. And while she's doing that, I'm just going to do some quick introductions for people who are joining us. This is artist Kyle Beal, and this is the second solo exhibition that Kyle's had with Viviane Art. I just realized I'm standing right in the middle of the artwork she's showing everyone. The very first exhibition of work she did with us, Kyle, were a bunch of mirror pieces. And the pieces Mika is showing everyone right now are very much connected with that work.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle was a Calgary guy for a good long time. Was it like 5 years, Kyle? Longer?
It was longer. I think it was about 8 years, but of course I was born and raised in Calgary.
Right.
So
And you went
it
to AU Arts, right? To ACAD?
that's correct. And then I left and went to the University of Victoria, and then
Right.
spent some time in Montreal, and then came back to Calgary in 2011, and
Yes.
then moved up to Edmonton in 2018.
Yes, with your lovely partner, Lindsay. And
That's right.
so you did your BFA at AU Arts, and that was 2001. And then you did your Master's of Fine Art at the University of Victoria.
That's correct.
Was there any instructors in particular that you think you can think of had a direct influence on how you make your work?
Um, uh, Hard to remember. It's been that long, unfortunately. I recall like having a nice personal relationship with like Jeffrey Hunter.
Mm,
He was a sessional teacher at the time I was at ACAD, and he's still a painter showing in Calgary at New Zones actually. Um, and just kind of having it was a casual kind of teaching relationship in that way. He was just kind of giving me, pointing me in directions to look kind of culturally and like at, various other producers and stuff. And I think that kind of thing sort of has persisted within my practice. But yeah, I had so many wonderful teachers, and not specific to this show, but rather recently with a piece I had shown at the Art Gallery of St. Albert.
mm.
I was struck very much by how much of a kind of a funny influence there was of like Vera Gartley in a particular work.
Oh, right.
Yeah, just her kind of signage pieces and stuff. So, it's funny how those kind of things just sort of trickle and percolate and circulate around your thinking, even though I don't tend to think overtly about maybe specific people, but certainly we all have our influences. And for me, I kind of liken my practice to a little bit of a magpie type creative process, and I think a lot of creators do, where you're picking up little bits from lots of different places and making them your own.
Yes. The
Yeah.
shots that Mika is showing right now are great examples of how the mirrored pieces that we have along the long wall of the gallery not only reflect the viewer, but the other works around them. So the last two pieces that she's been showing people have a really clear image of one of your drawings from across the gallery.
Mm-hmm.
Which was part of your intention, I believe, was it not?
Yeah, with those mirrors especially, for me, it's great to, as much as it's difficult to document them, to experience them. They're always reflecting things in the background, and so they're filled with, by the nature of their material, distractions from everywhere else.
Yes.
So in that way, they're not quite always, they're not perfectly discrete objects because they're reflecting their surroundings as much as they're an image.
Yes.
So, there's a real tension there that I find quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And,
It is.
it's sort of, yeah, it's very analogous to maybe, our constant state of distraction.
Mm. We're going to get around the gallery once and then really dive into these works. But
Yeah.
The photographer was in to shoot all of the exhibition for our virtual tour. And he had a lot of fun trying to keep himself out of the images. And then when I came in and I saw him and he was partway through his process, I said, well, don't do that. We want you in the images.
Yeah.
Because that's actually so much a part of how we appreciate the work is with the reflection in among what's been created as the artwork.
Yeah, like for me, there's a certain kind of humorous, I would call it really a problem of making works that are so sort of resistant to photography, but ultimately in a way about a certain amount of omnipresent photography that exists in our lives these days. Mostly by choice, but yeah, it's kind of a funny tension to have that, where typically you don't want the camera to be noticed.
While she is showing everyone the green room, and then we'll just quickly walk around the rest of the space. Do you have a beverage, Kyle?
Yes, I do.
Because, it's not the same as having an opening event and having people in the gallery and pouring wine and doing a toast to the artist in person. But I do like at these IG Live events to at least include that bit of ceremony that we're celebrating this incredible collection of pieces that I know were a labor of love, but a real labor. Like the amount of work in the space today is really quite incredible. So I want to toast you, Kyle. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations on an incredible exhibition. And I believe the adjective I used on Wednesday when we hung all the work was that it was really tight. And it is. Like it's so connected. And I think it tells a story. As people walk around the space, I think the work tells a real story.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I'd like to think I had a clear vision for this exhibition, although, within the nature of things constantly changing as you actually start to realize things. But
no, and you have to be able to move with things. That's part of what being an artist is.
Yeah.
Mika's about to come around to the sculpture, which is a study for Green Room.
That's right.
And then final days soon. Isn't that just like a sentiment that everyone can relate to right now? Like, can we be done with this already?
Yeah.
Was that some part of its creation, or final days soon? Is that about something else for you?
So that particular piece, as I had mentioned to you, I had kind of found it in just my travels, my day-to-day journeys, in I think about 2016 or 2017. And it was clearly for a going out of business um, sort of situation. But for whatever reason, the way it was phrased as final days soon just sort of resonated with me. Um, and so I've kind of hung on to it for, since till now. And it basically, the original sign is a version of that, which was, it was yellow spray paint on green coroplast.
Mm.
And I've kind of remade this sign in my own hand um, by respray painting it and then producing a stereograph or a silk screen of this thing. So it changes a little bit, but yeah, the text itself resonated with me because I don't know, it was just such a funny way to say we're going out of business, but it also maybe suggested that the end is also a beginning kind of thing.
Yes.
And so yeah, for me, I kind of really liked that, and it just had that right amount of ambiguity that I find interesting. And then yeah, to realize it as a print is sort of funny, and then to further realize it as a little sculpture just kind of made sense to me. It's like a little bunker, or it's sort of it's the opaque version of the green room, I suppose, which is maybe a more of a mind trap, whereas the green room I think is a little bit more of an optimistic piece, actually.
And then she's just coming up now to the final piece in the quick beginning tour, and it is a green room. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
as we were talking about it, it's an actual green room in the public library in Edmonton. Did you say?
That's right. Yeah, I found that in the Milner branch, which is the main branch of the Edmonton Public Library, which is kind of an interesting spot because libraries are just such great places, public spaces, and offer that access to information that we all can have. And then yeah, in the basement there's a theater in that branch, and this green room is just this generic room. And in just thinking about this exhibition, I knew I really was interested in extending an idea that I've worked with in my practice of performance and performance of the everyday into thinking about this waiting to perform, or this green room where maybe we're not performing. And it seems timely just as a thought to me, given we're all kind of on this great pause to some degree that is COVID. But it's not specifically tied to a COVID idea, but definitely intertwined with it at this moment. Because yeah, especially right now where we're all kind of like tapping our watches, waiting for the call.
Yeah, waiting for it to be done. And in classic
Yeah.
Beal style, you've got this little note drawn in that says, "No, but seriously, break a leg." Wouldn't that suck to finally come out of this stupid pandemic with all kinds of wild plans and end out with a broken leg or something? We're just
Well,
going to
that's also, it can suggest good luck,
Our audio might get a little scratchy for a second here, but the sun is shining a bit brightly, but for anyone who hasn't seen our posts or images, we're just going to take a quick look at the new public artwork that Kyle Beal created and was installed here in Inglewood on Tuesday, right outside the gallery door, and will live here from now on, and we're pretty excited about that. So come and see it in real life, and definitely come and see it when it's not got direct sunlight on it, because the lights are really quite wonderful. It's proving to be so incredibly apt for this particular exhibition, Kyle. Today, in fact, only about an hour ago, Mika and I watched this entire performance, really, of three young, beautiful influencers who looked like they were teenagers. And they were dolled up, makeup, clothes, shoes, eyelashes, the whole deal. And they were taking turns posing and taking pictures of each other in front of Night Watch. Okay. And meantime, Mika and I were sitting in the gallery watching them. We were like, oh my God, this is so perfect. And they don't even realize the content of this particular exhibition. And that's not the first time it's happened this week. It's already been a magnet for selfies. So kind of interesting, don't you think?
You know what? I think that's perfectly appropriate. But, also for me, maybe one of the new realities that you ought to consider in public art a little bit is, how people engage in them. And I remember the Esker Foundation, which is just across the street from you, they had that corridor by Kipwani. Mm-hmm. And that was a real selfie generator that, people were just going in there and doing photo shoots. It was that pink corridor, pink and blue.
Yes, I remember that.
That's part of our new reality of how we interact with art and experience it. So all the better to them, because at least they've come down and, maybe they can, interact with it, in various ways. And that's, to me, great. So
it's pretty cool.
And very on brand for the exhibition inside, but yeah.
I was showing my age a little bit because I looked over at Mika.
They missed some opportunities.
I was like, their skirts are so short, Mika. How old am I? Anyway, we've got some people joining us. I'm not sure how many, but it looks like quite a nice list. So thank you for joining us. Anyone who's taking part in our live tonight, please, if you have questions for Kyle, do not hesitate. Type them in. Mika, who is our gallery director, is in charge of the phone. So I can't see your questions, but she'll let me know if anything comes in. So by all means, ask away. But let's get into this concept, Kyle, because we're calling this the green room, and you sent me a link for a podcast that you had been listening to in your studio, I believe. And it was, at least in part, the inspiration for some of this, wasn't it? The Gaia Tolentino podcast?
Yeah, it wasn't, it was definitely, so she had published a book that I had read a couple of years ago. I'll hold it up for the camera. My earbuds just died. So she published this book called Trick Mirror. Oops, that's funny. I held it upside down, but that I just found really quite interesting. Maybe in 2018, and then in her promotion of that book, she was on a podcast with Ezra Klein. The podcast title escapes me now, but just the conversation they were having and the way she was kind of thinking about things really was in line and better articulated than some of the things I was thinking about. So it was really kind of like a bit of a light going on where you're just like, oh, okay, here's a much more intelligent person speaking much more eloquently about ideas I've kind of been feeling and having. And it's a different medium. She's a writer and I'm a visual artist. So
so she has a different articulation of her intelligence, but don't sell yourself short. Yeah. You're a very intelligent.
Just giving her a lot of credit because I really thought it was a wonderful podcast and book. That kind of started to inform. It just kind of stuck in the back of my head a little bit as I think, ideas do sometimes when they resonate, and that can really become generative to making a body of work, right? So,
right. Incredibly relevant I listened to it today, all 1 hour and 41 minutes of it. I was like, Kyle,
Yeah.
this thing is so long. Anyway, I listened to it today, and I mean, really, at the core of the conversation, she was talking about the internet, social media, and identity, and how those are all tied together. And really, I got the sense that she saw the whole internet thing as a huge negative and detriment. I'm not sure I agree with it universally as a negative or a detriment, but I can certainly see all the points she was making about how it sort of almost promotes a removal from the self, like from our authentic selves, because we become performers, right? We become performers. So that's a big part of this work. And the green room, the space we go to wait when we're performers and we're waiting to go on stage, that's the title of the exhibition. But each of these pieces is very much about performance.
That's right.
Not only online, not only on social media platforms, although it's a big part of your conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm trying to straddle a little bit of still in real life because, I think for me, it's probably an age thing, but where I'm not fully as versed or quite immersed in internet culture and keeping up with those things as younger people, and I shouldn't say younger people, but there's certainly people more invested in that where I definitely like real life as much as an online existence. And I'm old enough to, I'm 42, so I was more or less a fully formed adult, although rather probably immature by the time I even had my first email account, or certainly my first personal computer. We had a family computer, but I didn't own a computer of my own till the mid 2000s.
With the dial-up internet, so that if someone was on the internet, the phone would ring busy until they were off. Do you remember that?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. So so interestingly, my read is a little bit different than some others, but
it's become
you can't
really
ignore. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's become really important in the last 14 months.
Absolutely.
And certainly not as much on a personal level, but definitely on a business level. And let's face it, my work is basically my personal life too. The Instagram Live opportunities, the video, the opportunity to market and promote and build relationships with artists, with collectors, with curators through Instagram in particular, but other platforms as well, has become really, really important.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Overly important, though, right?
Yeah.
Like overly so.
Yeah, it's trying to kind of temper those things. And, I guess further to my idea of, or not idea, but history of owning a computer, I never thought I'd be on Facebook for over a decade when I joined it. So,
Yes.
it's interesting how these things just occupy, so much of our existence. And worth, examining a little bit.
I'm standing in front of Double Fantasy. And it's a mirror at first, right? Like, because some of these works are built up on clear glass.
That's right.
And some are mirrored. And this one is a mirror, right?
That's right.
So I'd like you to talk about a couple of things. First of all, the text on this piece. But I'd also like to start getting into your technical process because it's quite involved how you're making these.
Sure. So maybe I'll just speak more generally on the text. Okay. And for Double Fantasy and the other mirrors or text-based work in the exhibition, those are self-generated. so I'm writing something and playing with language and kind of refining things and finding rhythm and like I've always enjoyed writing and I've always enjoyed a certain amount of I'll call it poetry, but we really mean like lyrical prowess and wordplay and like rock and pop and folk music. And so that's kind of what I'm working with, and I'm trying in most of those to, kind of reflect back a little bit of the media and kind of have them be a little bit self-referential and acknowledge the viewer within them,
Mm.
and kind of play with the formatting a little bit. And even, the doubling is a mirror kind of doubles the image, it doubles the space, things like that. So that's kind of the double fantasy part of that particular work, and
Gotcha.
just a more general thought about the text. And then, yeah, from a process wise, what I've learned and discovered and with these, so some, as you say, I purchase as mirrors, and so I work with a glass company here in Edmonton who produces these 24 by 30-inch pieces of glass for me with
Right.
a 1.25-inch bevel.
Right.
And so I can either get them as a commercially made mirror or a piece of glass.
Right.
And with these, Double Fantasy is a mirror. So what I can do is strip off the protective paint on the back of a mirror,
Yes.
and then you're left with that thin film of aluminum that you can then manipulate. And in the case of Double Fantasy, I manipulate it with Drano. So
Right.
just, readily available Drano acts as an etching agent and a patina to eat away at the aluminum a little bit. And
Yes.
so that reveals just clear glass that then I can use either paint on or in most of these I use the traditional method known as varied glamise,
Mm-hmm.
which is the process of applying metal leaf to glass. And
Yes.
that is a even more traditional technique for creating mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give a shout out to Jarvis Hall, where I used to work. He introduced me to that process, and I've kind of picked it up. And again, it's one of those things you have just kind of floating around in the back of your head like a magpie, uh,
Yes.
finding something shiny, and then 5 or 6 years later, I realized, oh, I'm ready to make mirrors,
Right.
and so kind of have been teaching myself a little bit this technique and going off what I recall from him and doing some online research about it. So long story short, veriglamise is the process of attaching metal leaf to glass, and you use a kind of a gelatin size, which is just a very watered down jello as the glue. And as the water evaporates, the gelatin is left, and it basically vacuum sucks the metal leaf to the glass, giving you that mirror-like finish. Although,
Yes.
to be fair, not as crisp as commercially applied. I guess it's like aluminum nitrate. Um, and then, yeah, I just paint the back of those mirrors with another coat of protective paint, and that's kind of the general process. Um,
But the pigment, like where we're
that's
seeing
right.
pigment, is that always paint?
That is a metal leaf. I was able to find multicolored metal.
Ah,
So there's
okay.
purples, there's greens.
Yep.
Um, and the fun part is you're working background, and it's a sort of reductive process and an additive process, but there's really, you're either doing one or the other. You can't really do them both. Um, so you don't really see what the final product is until the end, when it
Yes.
finally becomes opaque.
Right.
So for
Right.
me, I really enjoy that aspect of chance, and it's a little bit liberating as a place to work relative to my drawing practice, which is for me a little bit, it's harder to get that freedom.
So the piece beside it, I'm sorry, I still can't read it. I can read some of it, but it is so camouflaged. But that
Yeah,
is part of what makes it so interesting. So all of this color is all from the metal leaf.
that's right. So that's a variegated metal leaf, it's called, or variegated, yeah. And so it comes in that kind of camouflagey, weird. I think it made with heat, but so that piece is called Acting, and the text embedded within that is variations on acting, acting dumb, acting up, acting professional, acting funny, acting
Acting
suspicious,
strange.
act, acting strange, acting like myself. Um,
Yes.
and and so I wanted it to be, camouflaged in that way because that's kind of how we're acting those things a lot of the time, um, to ourselves or to others, right? You don't necessarily know those things. Um,
Right.
Certainly, we've all had that sort of, I'm sure, socially awkward moment where you kind of, step out of your body a little bit and they're like, why am I talking like this? Or, whatever, standing like this, or, those kind of things. So, that sort of invisible act that so much of the show is kind of thinking about.
Yes. And I
Yeah,
mean, and part of why the mirror is so powerful
yeah.
is that it is one of those moments other than I confess I do this, check my lipstick, check my eyeliner, whatever, you flip the camera on your phone and look at yourself like it's a mirror. Um,
Yeah.
we get
And
these shots of reality of what we actually look like, you
well,
know?
when I was kind of doing some, I call it informal research because I'm not hitting the books that hard about it, but I do like to do some background and research. And um, when sort of Louis the XIV got his Hall of Mirrors, that
Yes,
was kind of one of the behavioral changes that sort of took place. As um, suddenly they were all very much aware of what they looked like, whereas previously they weren't. You would maybe have a small mirror from time to time,
yes,
but they were luxury objects in that seeing yourself constantly in full, you start to perform for yourself as much as the court,
right.
um, which I just found just so profoundly interesting, to think about. And it seems like a million years ago, but it's sort of, a fairly recent development, for us to be so entwined with our self-image.
Right, which we are,
Yeah,
and that certainly has
yeah,
been accentuated with technology and social media and the selfie and that whole part of
hmm
our culture. Um,
yeah.
this piece, an accurate reflection, a wonderful illusion. Is this also metal leaf, or is there other material in this one?
It's metal leaf. It's actually a black metal leaf, and the
Hmm.
text, the accurate reflection, is a blue metal leaf. Again, leafed onto etched aluminum, but I kind of wanted to have that really heavy, sort of aged, almost gone patina on the lower half of the wonderful illusion.
Hmm.
Um, so there's some just kind of darkened. It's like brown, black hints of the silver still, but yeah. So it's a real combination. But you
And
see
Kyle,
those squares, that is
the,
the leaf.
that's the leaf. I was just going to say because they begin to reference the grid painting or something,
Yeah.
and that's just a part of the material you're using, these squares.
Yeah, and you can control where you place them. So
Hmm.
sometimes I like to put them more in an obvious grid as opposed to overlapping the edges.
Right. Right.
um, because yeah, I like that kind of breaking up of that grid a little bit and creating a little bit of those different planes within this flat surface.
Well, and while you're describing a really almost scientific, exploratory, experimental, technical process, these look very painterly
Hmm.
to me. Not all of them
Yeah,
as much, but that one and the one beside it, why don't we just move over to that? It looks very painterly to me.
and funnily enough, that probably is the most painterly. So that one was just a piece of glass
Hmm.
that I masked off the text with, and then etched into the glass with, um, using just a kind of a commercially available glass etching thing from a hobby shop, and then in that etching, it's kind of inconsistent. But again, it's hard to know what you're getting when you're doing it, um, which is part of the fun for me. And then I rubbed in pastel into that fine texture.
Like a chalk pastel?
Yeah, basically, I use those compressed pastels, but yes, it's the
Hmm.
same thing.
Hmm.
And so that's where that kind of color gradient comes. And then from that, again, I used the verglamise leafing to put that. It's not gold; it's aluminum. It's yeah, but it's a gold colored aluminum leaf on the back
Right.
to get that. And you don't really see the seams on that particular work.
No,
It's quite
it's
intentional, right? So
which is that why it looks so painterly, but it's also all of these just the gesture of how you've applied the pastel.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just the inconsistencies of how that etched a little bit, but I really like that. That's there's chance, but it's a sort of controlled chance by sort of knowing your materials a little bit. So that's sort of the combination, which is sort of fun to play
And
around with.
and
And again, for me, I'm not. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say in the text on this one, it was easy until it got hard. It was hard until it got easy.
Yeah, I don't know. That one's a bit of an outlier, but I definitely it just kind of resonated with me, and I had variations of that in my notebook for some time. Um, and so, yeah, I just wanted to use that one. It doesn't specifically reference the mirror as much as some of the other ones or the act of looking, but I think it's a sentiment to which we can all relate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a true Bealism, um, straight from the notebooks of Kyle Beal.
That's
Um,
right. My
and
teenage
okay,
lyric book.
yeah, it's awesome. I mean that's art. I mean, these are art in for so many reasons and in so many layers. But I mean, you think about someone like Ed Ruscha, the
Hmm.
power is his use of words as well. So,
That's right.
um, so now we're in front of watching me, and you've really used the grid here, and you've used the grid with a variation in color that is incredibly pleasing. And
Yeah.
And there almost is like a marbling that's happening in some of them that I'm assuming is just part of how the metal leaf got applied.
It is. And these ones in particular were so delicate that they just almost crack when you touch them. And sometimes that's a wonderful effect, and then other times it becomes a frustrating thing to try to apply. But in the instance, um, sometimes they'll crack as you apply them, and then also if there's little folds and stuff, when it dries, you've got to not quite polish the back, but rub it with cotton balls or some sort of non-abrasive cloth, and you can still rub some off. So I can't point at the thing, but some of that cracking is coming from that, and other is just coming from the delicacy of the leaf. But yeah,
Right.
again, I had found these kind of polychrome metal leaves that um, were sort of wonderful. And as I had said to you when we were installing the last artist stock I did it for my first show with you. I had alluded to a fear of color within my work.
Hmm.
And so kind of for me, finding all these other colors sort of helps make that decision
Hmm.
a little bit. And then you can just, you've got maybe a parameter with which you can work with the color that gave me some comfort, I think. Provides a little bit of a safety net,
These
I
aren't
suppose.
these aren't necessarily comfortable work, but I think that's a good thing. I just wanted
Yeah.
to ask you, within the text on this one, there's all of
Mhm.
these sort of like slashing line movements.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
I do, yes. So yeah, so part of then these works is about maybe graphic design is a bit of a stretch, but there's a certain amount of graphic preparation that needs to be done. And so I spent a lot of time refining the text and then also working with fonts to kind of refine that a little bit and try to find something that I want. And so that particular font kind of has this sort of, I guess I would call it a cartoonish kind of shorthand for reflection or glass or something
Mm,
like that.
got you.
And so that's kind of where it's coming from. And then, for me, that particular text is not so much in wordplay, but was this kind of thinking about this repetitive kind of outro to a song or something like that, where people just often repeat the lyric um,
Right.
that I kind of enjoyed.
Mm.
So, it's about finding, all those little different rhythms and kind of graphic little standards and putting them together in a way that hopefully is interesting to others.
It's very interesting, Kyle. And it is actually, you use the word rhythmic. It's an incredibly rhythmic piece. Okay, we're gonna keep moving. Um, and we're in front of this one. Now, you got to explain to me how these words came to you. Is this just free flow? Baby, bear,
Um,
blank, duck, fuck, funny, horse, joke, mean, serious, shit, straight, sweet face.
it's that piece is all the faces we kind of make or can make, and again, it's kind of like working with those descriptions and those words to find a sort of rhythm within it a little bit. And that's one of the earlier ones I made. And sort of a funny thing, I was thinking of like a Mel Bachner a little bit, if people are familiar with his work at all, of his thesaurus paintings. And it's not a thesaurus painting, but it kind of, that's where I was thinking about his work and just will acknowledge that influence within this work and some of the others. But so that's kind of, these are just faces we make, straight face, blank
Yeah,
face, duck
yeah.
face, any of those things. You know, um, a horse face is like Tom Waits or Jim Jarmusch, the filmmaker, they're part of this Lee Marvin horse face club.
Oh,
It's
and
it's
we don't
just
even
the structure of some people's faces. That's
we don't need the explanation of what shit face looks like.
me me at my first dinner party after we reopened.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and then the last one in this row,
Yeah,
joyous music rising to a crescendo.
yeah. I mean, that one just is kind of this like, yeah, it's a subtitle to how you might feel looking in the mirror, right? And so much of kind of how we think about ourselves is through narrative, I think, where we kind of build a narrative ourselves, and typically we're the hero in our own stories. And so this was kind of that thought of just pleasure, actually. It's just
Um,
the pleasure in looking. And
I hadn't thought about that, but now
yeah,
when I look at myself in the mirror on a particularly good day, I am going to hear music.
yeah.
Let's move
And
along to the drawings because we've
sure.
spent a lot of time on the mirrors, which is because
Hmm.
they're
Hmm.
amazing. But there are also four drawings, all of the same scale, all with similar treatment in that you've done a detailed, very high detailed graphite drawing, and then you've represented the green screen in one
Hmm.
way or another in each of them with acrylic. Two of them, these two here, are beautiful interior spaces with the things that you might see in a home.
Yeah,
Um,
fairly domestic space.
macrame plant hangers and art on the walls. And then the other two, the one here on the end, and then the one over on our movable wall, we'll get around there, are really industrial spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Quite cold, actually. Um, so can you just talk a little bit about, first of all, why the green screen in the middle of the room, but then also the dichotomy of those two different kinds of spaces that you're representing here?
Sure. So, yeah, so for people that don't know me, I also do work as an art installer. And throughout this pandemic, one of the things that I've installed or seen people working on is their Zoom backgrounds. Um, and I found that very, it's not even funny, it's just a sensible reality if you're on a Zoom meeting all day, but it kind of acted as maybe a little bit of a gateway for me to think about this sort of really curation of our life and this sort of intermingling of the real and the digital, where so often things are so, with especially with social media, everything is so edited and curated that there's an unreality to what most of us are presenting online, which is not, you know, it's I guess becoming more and more understood, unless you're a baby boomer, which is a different problem of their understanding of reality. But it's just kind of this idea of this intermingling of the personal and this kind of idealized presentation that it would be a blank space really because you could insert anything
Right,
onto a green screen. Um,
right.
and especially nowadays, like in film and things, we don't even see the difference typically. The way digital has gone so quickly, it's imperceptible to us, I would say, for the most part. And so for those drawings, I kind of knowing, kind of having this established kind of solid green thing, screen idea, I really wanted to go into a handmade sort of line-based drawing style, which is, I don't want to say a departure, but just very deliberate move for me just to kind of really have that handmade, every inch of the page sort of covered by a, almost a, they're not that expressive, but there's something sort of very fundamental and for me immediate about drawing like just with graphite. So that's kind of the tension I think of the drawings is those two things. And then, I just, funnily enough, the two kind of institutional spaces, this warehouse sort of space that we're looking at now, and the first one we looked at, which was kind of a row of columns, are just a little bit more imagined spaces that are also kind of characterless in a way. They're a little bit generic in their institutionalness, whereas the two domestic spaces are certainly much more filled with or inhabited, I guess, with a actual personality.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, to be fair, derived from my own house, just given the way quarantine has gone, although they're
Yes.
still within the realm of imagined. I like to use a photographic reference, but I don't like to be slavish to it. But it's nice just to help get some scale and things like that going on. So that's kind of the tension. I don't honestly, I kind of made the spaces a little bit intuitively and, just looking at photos and looking at kind of what I could do. And, unfortunately, half the time existing only in my own house.
Right. What's going on with
Fortunately
these?
or unfortunately, but so that's kind of the tension of the two. And I suppose, yeah, the whole warehousey institutional thing is a little bit more imagined, but also a little bit more filled with potential or expansiveness. Whereas the domestic ones are definitely smaller and more contained.
Well,
Um,
they're the same size drawings, but I know exactly what you're saying. Like they
yeah,
feel
yeah,
much more almost claustrophobic. Um,
yeah.
and the
And that,
windows in both of these institutional spaces are all blacked out.
mhm. Well, I guess in part of it was in this particular one, and it's quite dark on the inside. I was imagining a nighttime. It's sort of a
Oh, right.
nocturnal
Okay.
space,
Gotcha.
but
Gotcha.
especially when you've got kind of like different light coming in at different times of day, windows do tend to get blacked out a little bit, and they become, if not fully opaque, very difficult to see through. Um, that I kind of liked as a further reference just to sort of the screen or, a mirror again, um, where there's this sort of, light separation of your reality.
So, Kyle, I don't know how this happened, but we're already in our last, what, 7 minutes or something? How did
Well,
that?
I'll just go on and on. That's my
No,
problem.
no, I mean, it's just like, oh my God. And I want us to talk about the green room, the actual
Sure,
sculpture, the green room. So,
sure.
so let's move on to that. We saw the study for this, which is made out of
Hmm.
paper, the small sculpture early on in our conversation. This one is plexiglass. The green that is on the acrylic is gorgeous. Like it's just, I'm living beside this thing, sitting there in my desk chair, and every once in a while I get this luminous green out of the corner of my eye. So for someone who wasn't too sure about using color, you really nailed this
Yeah.
one. Um,
Thank
can
you.
you talk a little bit about why you made this and about how precarious it is? I mean, it's very solid, and yet it's just pinned with a small brass nail that
Yeah,
slides in, right, in 4 locations.
that's right.
So very
So,
Richard Serra.
yeah, as I had mentioned to you, part of my inspiration for this, if you will, just aesthetically, was a work called One Ton Prop by Richard Serra,
Mm-hmm.
where he's got these four slabs of lead just kind of precariously balanced against each other like a house of cards.
Right.
Um, and that was kind of a bit of a starting point, but I had known early on when I was developing this exhibition a few things, and I knew I wanted to make this thing called the Green Room, and I knew I wanted to call the exhibition the Green Room. And when I started it, and not that that feeling has changed, I was also at the tail end of building a studio for myself up here in Edmonton, and feeling very much like there's a real sense of optimism and possibility and pleasure in having this space that I kind of wanted to have. It's not about my studio, but that sense of pleasure and looking forward to the performance kind of coming through. So that's sort of a little bit of the background of that piece. And then originally I kind of envisioned it almost as a sort of a grotto or a hangout space, but it got pared back as I developed it, but to just this kind of moving blanket. So it's about a little bit this almost the bare minimum of architecture you need to kind of have this space for yourself. And I mean, I realize that it's unenterable, but
we can't get in, and if we
yeah,
could get in, at most we might be able to fit 2 people if we really squished.
Yeah, and so there's a little bit of a utopic idea of it, but you know, by the same token, it would also be a little bit of a house of mirrors, I think, too. And so, you know, I think for me, it's a little bit of an abstract kind of personification of some of the ideas in the show, but yeah, it just kind of, for whatever reason, I just had a very clear vision, although it changed as I went along for this work, wanting to make it and kind of, you know, make a large sculpture that kind of activated a space and again expressed something that my drawings can't, or the mirrors can't, or you know, just try to explore a different angle to this idea. And so that's kind of where that work came from and what it's about. Yeah, but
Awesome.
definitely, I find it very hopeful to look at that thing in a funny way.
I'm going to wrap us up here, Kyle.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening, just the exhibition is up until July 4th. And at least for now, the gallery is open full retail hours, Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 6 every day except Sunday. We're open 12 to 5. We have a 5-guest maximum. And of course, you need to wear your masks, but we have a lot of space in here. And we would be happy to have viewers come and see Kyle's beautiful work, the green room. We're excited to live with it for the next number of weeks, and we're really excited to live with Night Watch outside for years to come. So Kyle, thank you for joining us. Thank you for this wonderful work. And the virtual tour will be up hopefully within the week for those of you who can't get to us, but hopefully we'll see many of you. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Awesome. And I'd just like to say thanks to everybody who tuned in as well. And thank you, of course, to Viviane and Mika for hosting this Insta Live event.
Mwah. Thank you,
Terrific.
Kyle.
All right.
Okay, talk soon.
Good, thanks. Yep.